stood behind us is a mixture of Prison Officer Association members, so prison officers. We've also got people coming from PCS, UCU, a couple of other unions. So we just want our voice to be heard.
Yeah, we've got people from all over the United Kingdom, England, Wales, Northern Ireland and Scotland.
And me, along with a whole batch of my colleagues from the Scottish prisons, have come down to support my colleagues in England and Wales on what is ultimately a joint venture around pay and pensions in particular, and the fact that we're in a ludicrous situation where we're being asked to operate in a gallery at the age of 68.
Come over today to try to lobby Parliament. We had meetings with MPs yesterday, and we'll have meetings today with MPs.
Prison officers haven't got the right to strike, so what we're doing, we're having the right to protest, and nobody can stop us from doing that.
It's letting politicians know that we won't stand for this any longer. We're getting assaulted at record level, at record rates, and we're getting older, so we need someone to step in now, the government to step in and help us. We've given up our leave day, we've given up our rest days for this. We're here because it needs to change before prison officers killed on duty.
I've taken a day's leave today, as will everybody else have taken leave, to come and show the public what we actually have to put up with.
We want to get our message across loud and clear about three clear themes, which is violence on our members, pension age, 68 is far too late for prison officers and related grades, and privatisation of prisons.
We've got banners coming, we've got PCS are joining us as well to give us support. We've got the National Stop Sewers Network here giving us support. It's just important that we let the public know what we're doing. We've had people coming past it earlier on as members of the public and saying, what, do you expect you to work to 68? And we've said, yeah.
You can't take £900 million out of the budget and expect everything to run like clockwork. We'll get 8,000 fewer prison officers since 2010. It just doesn't add up. We need more staff, better pay, decent pension age, and then we can deal with the violence in our jails and do the job that we're paid to do. In actual fact, what that means is rehabilitation for prisoners and restoring order to our prisons. The prison service is in crisis up and down the country, and it's because of these measures under the so-called austerity.
The link is proven, they continue to deny it, but the link between austerity and rising levels of violence and staff cuts is proven. It's no coincidence that they cut the MOJ by 40% and all of a sudden violence skyrockets to the current levels where over 10,000 prison officers were assaulted in the last 12 months alone, which is unacceptable. Just touching on with regards to the rise in age and the injuries that we suffered. Today they call it a POA march, but it's not going to be a march, it's more like going to be a hobble.
I remember when the leaving rate in the prison service used to be less than 3% turnover. Now it's in double figures nationally. But what we're actually seeing is localised areas when it can be as high as between 25 and 30% turnover.
I remember working with staff with 10, 15, 20 years service when I started as a prison officer, and I was able to look to them to help, guide, advise, and put me straight on a number of matters. That luxury is no longer available. So we'll have to wait at least a couple of years to see what new staff we keep.
Where people come into the job and they look and see what they've got to do, and they're not prepared to suffer the violence on a day-to-day basis when they can get paid better elsewhere.
No one wants to be working in a prison at 68. It should be 60 at the most. It used to be 55, which I think was right. And they just changed our pensions without asking us. That's another issue. And we're facing more and more violence. And we've just come to protest about that.
The government, without any agreement or consultation, have just changed our retirement age overnight through the courts to 68. And it's abhorrent. It's disgraceful. I feel like I've had something stolen off me. My life has been stolen off me. My well-being has been stolen from me. I joined in the year 2000, and I thought to myself, well, I will be able to retire in, say, 40 years' time at the age of 60, and I can plan for my retirement, have a decent standard of living when I'm retired. Unfortunately, that decent standard of living has been taken away from me. I'm ecstatic to be here with my colleagues who are facing the same things as me on a daily basis, the same pressures I face. It's good to know that we're all here to support the same cause, and campaign for the same cause, and hopefully get something from this cause as well.
There's no right-thinking person could claim that it would be a good idea to force prison officers to work to the age of 68. There actually aren't, as far as I'm aware, any prison officers who have currently made it to 68. And bearing in mind that our pension was only changed because Parliament was able to change the law, because we came under the Superannuation Act, for the POA, without the right to strike, it's very difficult for us to get that changed. Of course, MPs can go with a full pension after 5 years. I don't think the House of Commons is the same environment as a prison, and the lack of investment in prisons over the years has made them more violent. So the prospect is of not getting a decent pension, probably being forced out of the job as a result of injury or illness, with no compensatory mechanism for the loyal service that prison staff deliver.
The next new build prisons are all going to be run privately as well, which is an absolute disgrace. Prisons should not be privatised, they should all remain in the public sector. We've been dealing with the results of all the cuts and the austerity now for many years. It's been very, very tough for all of our members. It's also affected prisoners and their well-being and how well we can look after them. It's been a very, very difficult time for our members, and the constant attack from this Tory government needs to end.
Private prisons making money off of people's incarceration is absolutely abhorrent and morally repugnant. And we need private prisons returning to the public sector. We've already proved we can run them successfully if we're given the resources and investment. So let's get them back into state ownership. It's important for us to get the message across to the Tory government that we couldn't possibly continue to work in the most hostile and violent workplace in Western Europe in our 60s. And that's why we're calling for them to sit down with us and negotiate a reinstatement of our retirement age of 60 so we can have dignity and respect when we do retire.
68 is too late!
I would ask Lord Hutton to publicly announce that he made a mistake when he did the review of civil service pensions, because he never recognised prison officers as a frontline uniformed service and an essential service. And it's quite amusing when we take protest action. We have Rory Stewart on Channel 4 News stating that we can't have prison officers taking industrial action. They're as essential as the police. Well, if that's the case, Mr. Stewart, give us back our retirement age of 60.
Well, he's here because it's my day off, but I work for ECU and support prison educators like Brian, who obviously are working in exactly the same conditions that prison officers are working in, and struggling to do their jobs on a daily basis. I mean, I think it's a pretty difficult environment for anybody to be working in, and yeah, I mean, 68. We have people who are delivering education when pregnant as well, so it's a slightly mad environment to be working in full stop, but if you kind of add in age, pregnancy, that kind of stuff, it makes it a really difficult environment to be working in. We've got to show solidarity because it's the experience that all of our members are going through as well.
All that cut in funding affects everybody. The people we're meant to be looking after, the people working there, and the people who the HMPPS are contracting to.
And it's not regarded enough as a central public service either. I mean, I think people think that when you put prisoners in prison, you just lock them away and that solves the problem. But actually, we have to find a way to give them ability to return to society and play a meaningful role. It costs £35,000 a year to keep a prisoner locked in their cell. And actually, we want to make sure that they're not coming back to those cells again. We want to make sure that they get a good education, get a good chance, and can live a meaningful and purposeful life.
From the public's point of view, they should be thinking that spending money in prison is a good investment, and in the long run it should actually save them money.
I mean, some of the prisoners we lock up are young 16, 17-year-old, 6'2" children, and they're expecting us to deal with them and their volatile behaviour at 68. Most of our establishments have got several flights of stairs, which we need to get up quickly to support each other. Some of our establishments have got 5 floors. There's no lifts, and they're expecting 68-year-olds to deal with the prisoners as to climb up the 5 floors and deal with a volatile prisoner. Our problem is that nobody actually sees what we do, because everything we do is behind a gate or a wall.
It's been very effective. The power of protest is always a good one, and as you will see, we brought the traffic to a standstill near Downing Street and so forth. It's always good to flex your muscle in relation to that, and it's a peaceful protest, and I think our members have done exceptionally well today in the Central Methodist Hall, where we will hold our rally and in a lobby of MPs.
Richard Pagon's going to speak, John McDonnell, and I'm certainly interested in seeing what Liz Saville-Roberts, who's been a close ally of the POA for many years, and I'm looking forward to see what she has to say. And then we intend on going in Parliament and lobbying our own MPs.
There's more privatisation, there's worse wages, terms and conditions, there's a massive hike in assaults, not just on staff, but on prisoner. There's the intimidation, the bullying, the drugs. Everything is upside down within this much needed service. The answer is we've got to fight against this, because I'll tell you, fine words mean nothing. We've got to fight against these injustices in the workplace. And it is a workplace, it's a special workplace. I'll give you 100% on every single issue that you raised there, and much more, because you deserve much more. You keep people like me and millions of other people safe at night, and you deserve to be treated with the utmost of respect and credit, and not the disdain which you have been for too many years. So thank you. It's up to us to fight. This should just be on the way to a great victory for the Prison Officers Association, because you really need the ability and the legislation to allow you to function as a trade union. And when you get that, and I know you've had industrial action beforehand, when you get that, I'm looking forward to the massive rallies and the massive marches up and down this country, because you know what? You're in the right. Thank you very much. Thanks.
But now we've got people in the Labour movement on the front bench, people like Richard Bergen, who speaks the right language on your behalf in Parliament. Somebody has to do it. And I'll tell you, they're doing a better job than in all the years I've been a member of Parliament. Because it's vital that we win this battle. Thank you very much. You've been a wonderful audience, and it's very important that we fight this battle together. Thank you.
Colleagues, we have unfettered access to the Labour Party, the shadow cabinet. As you can see from the stage and the invited guests, no false promises from them. We've got Jeremy Corbyn, the leader, wearing a POA badge in the House of Commons today in support.
But we've seen them attack the fire service. We've seen the cuts in the police service. We've seen the massive cuts in the NHS. We've seen what's happening across our society, what that man walking behind me is going to put right in the future when we have a Labour government. It's unfortunate to say, 21st century Britain isn't a very nice place to be. And when you take away the support structures, when you take away care in the community, when you take away mental health, when we've got 4 million people in in-work poverty, desperate to feed their families, when we've got children who go hungry outside of term time, why are we surprised there's an increase in crime?
We've given some promises to yourselves in terms of what will happen in the prison service. Now, we set up the Justice Unions Group a number of years ago. I was one of the founding members, and we brought together the POA, NAPO, PCS, and it was to give a voice in Parliament to prison officers, to probation officers, and to those who are working within the justice system. We said if you start privatising the prisons, what will happen is profit will be put before service. Profit will be the main motive of these companies, and it doesn't matter whether or not people get looked after, rehabilitated, or the levels of violence or suicide. It will be profit that they go for, and that's exactly what's happened. We said if you cut the thousands of staff that you intended to do, that actually, as sure as night follows day, there'll be an increase in violence. And we've been here, many of you have been here before, we've taken the photographs to show MPs and tried to show ministers the scars on the faces and bodies of our members as a result of the cuts that they've made and the increase in violence. We also said as soon as you cut staff, there'll be an increase in suicides, and that's exactly what we've seen. And to be honest, it's a tragedy that everything we predicted has actually happened. Well, the point now is to say we're not going to tolerate it anymore, and to protest and to draw attention to the ongoing problems that we experience in the service, of course, but the recognition is that this government will never respond. They're not interested. All they're interested in doing is privatising our public services so their mates, the donors to the Tory party, will actually make larger profits, and that's what they've done with the justice system overall. First of all, we need to ensure that we end the privatisation of the prison service. And it isn't just about ending contracts in the future. Our task now will be to plan bringing those private prisons back into public ownership and democratic control. And that's the proposal we've been debating and discussing how we will do that. And it will be led, that process will be led by the POA working with us in government. That's the first thing. The second thing is we will restore staffing levels in the prisons. But the best way of restoring staffing levels, you know, is to make sure, yes, you recruit, but the best way of recruiting and retaining is to make sure people are paid a proper wage that reflects the expertise that they're providing and the service they're providing. And part of that is the third issue. When they brought forward the proposals on increasing the retirement age, we asked a number of MPs, when you reach 68, do you want to be dealing with this? Do you want to be dealing with the physical violence that is meted out to prison officers? Do you want to undertake that level of physical and mental stress as well? Of course they didn't. Of course they didn't, yet they still rammed it through. We want a prison service that provides us with, yes, security, but also rehabilitation. And the only way you can do that is to make sure that you have prison officers, yes, properly trained, properly rewarded, but also physically capable of doing that job. We've campaigned year in, year out. We've had lobby after lobby. We've tried to explain to government time and time again, and literally successive governments have turned a blind eye and a deaf ear to what we've been saying. This is a trade union. It should have the same trade union rights as any trade union in this country. It should have the rights that are provided by the International Labour Organization Convention. What does that mean? It should have the right for you to withdraw your labour as part of your trade union rights. You most probably know this joke, but it happened under Labour. When a number of the lads and lasses came out one day and took action, I got a phone call into my office. Steve rang me and said, look, we're coming out. We're at branch meetings and all the rest of it, and that's it. And I said, well, Jack Straw was the Home Secretary at the time, and I said, well, I'll give him a ring. I'll let him know what's happening, just out of courtesy, really. And you must probably know this, so I phoned his office up, and they said, well, it's illegal. I said, well, who's going to lock him up? Because it was unreal. It was unreal. That was under a new Labour government. That will never happen under a Jeremy Corbyn Labour government. Never. We're a social movement now as well as a political party. When we go into government, we all go into government. So when we go into government and we start the reforms in the justice system, in prisons in particular, it will be the POA alongside us managing that process. Because what we need to do, and this is common sense, isn't it? When we reform the prison and justice system, we alongside us the professionals at the front line, and that's you. POA members, PCS members, and yes, with probation, NAPO members. You'll be in government with us, and you will transform the justice system in this country, and we, I hope, and I predict, we will become world leaders on how to make a community safe, how to rehabilitate people, and actually how we contribute to that society that we want to create. It's a society based upon social justice and equality. You will be key in delivering that. And we'll do it. How will we do it? We'll do it through the traditional Labour movement value of solidarity, working together. Solidarity.
Thank you, John MacDonald, Honorary Life Member of the POA.
Unless health and safety is sorted in our prisons, for you and for the prisoners, nothing else can happen. We can talk about rehabilitation, but until the place is safe, nothing else is going to happen. On the one hand, the government is happy to talk about you as being an emergency service, and yet they expect you to work to 68. And it's so patently ridiculous that it's cruel, it's unreasonable, it's unworkable, it's part of the problem that we have in recruitment. And could you please write to all your members of Parliament, draw attention to it, don't let this happen. I was in Swansea, you walk past those great high walls. The public don't know what's happening in there. Yeah? We can talk amongst ourselves, but you need to get MPs to understand, you need to get journalists to understand, because the sympathy with you, the unacceptability of the violence that you face, the fact that you're expected to retire at 68, ridiculous age, you need to get those stories out because it'll be better for your members, it'll be better for rehabilitation, and for this sad, broken society, divisive society in which we find ourselves in 2019, this will be one of the things that can make a real difference. Diolch yn fawr iawn i chi.
Thank you, Liz. I think what Liz says is quite important. Let your MPs know what's going on inside your jails. Invite them in, invite them to go on the parliamentary scheme. And I think today, after our march around London, unescorted by the police, the message would have got through loud and clear.
Cuts to staff and budgets are directly to blame for this epidemic of violence that is sweeping our prisons and your workplaces. Slashing staffing and budgets was a deliberate attempt by Grayling to drive down the costs of public prisons to those of the private sector. But this so-called benchmarking has unleashed a dangerous race to the bottom, with record levels of violence, an assault on an officer every hour. Since you started your protest down here in London today, there will have been another 10 assaults, at least, in our prisons. 2 more of your colleagues, at least, assaulted. And that's why Labour has backed your demand for better protection at work. And that's why we've repeatedly called on the government to get around the table and talk instead of running off straight to court when you take protest action when you feel you have no other option. And will below inflation pay rises help with retention? Of course not. Will forcing people to work in this demanding and dangerous job until they're 68 years of age help with retention? Of course not. Grayling oversaw the outsourcing of prison maintenance works to Amy and Carillion, if you remember them. The result of this? Windows left smashed in, cell doors broken, rat-infested prisons with rehabilitation seriously undermined, therefore leaving our communities less safe. And it was the Tories that took the decision to hand the first publicly run prison to a private provider, giving HMP Birmingham to G4S. Well, what a disaster that was. As always, privatisation meant corners cut. It meant inadequate staffing levels. It meant overworked staff asked to do more and more on less and less. It was so bad that even this neo-Thatcherite government was forced to return HMP Birmingham to the public sector. Congratulations on all you do, and congratulations on all you are going to do together as a union to turn our prison service round. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Richard.
We've had some very strong commitments. Behind the scenes, myself, Mark and others work hard to brief the likes of Richard Bergen, Jeremy Corbyn, and indeed John McDonnell and Ian Lavery and all the other MPs that are very supportive to this union. We use Kevin Maguire as well, who's always on side with this trade union, and my good friend Mick Whelan as well is always very supportive of this trade union. Mark first approached me last September, I think it was, when we were at the Labour Party conference along with Joe to discuss strategies and moving forward. And Mark said, what if we put on another march and rally? And we agreed the themes that are close to your heart, i.e. the three-pronged approach, violence, pension age and privatisation. I think there's been so many positives today. When you hear Labour politicians speaking so openly about restoring our trade union rights. I've never, in all the time I've been in this union, have listened to politicians in the old Labour Party, or New Labour, whatever you want to call it, giving those commitments to this trade union. We've worked very hard, myself and the chairman, behind the scenes with one-to-one meetings with Richard Bergen, and they openly asked for my input into the Labour Party manifesto on crime. Now, I've never been approached before by any political party to have an input into the manifesto, and we did. And those commitments about privatisation, violence reduction, and restoring our trade union rights along with our pension age is very, very real. Because now they've said it in an open forum. They were saying it behind closed doors to us. They've said it in an open forum. And I, for one, believe that they are true to their word. But let me be clear, this is just the beginning. And you've heard MP after MP tell you to go about your business, contact your MPs, encourage your members, because that is the only way that we can win. So this actually is the beginning for us on a journey to try and get the things that we want for the benefit of our members in future. So thank you very much for your attendance today, because without you, it wouldn't have been a success. And I think to see proud people walking through the streets of London and all the people that were stopping to watch and giving us support, the media attention, it's been incredible. So thank you very, very much.